Let us consider the Knights Templar, the Templars first. It is difficult for us nowadays to understand, even to believe, their influence in the later Middle Ages, founded in the early 12th century to protect the pilgrims flocking to the holy places after the First Crusade. They were within 50 years firmly established in almost every kingdom of Christendom, from Denmark to Spain, from Ireland to Armenia. Within a century, the poor fellow soldiers of Jesus Christ were, despite their Benedictine vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, financing half Europe, the most powerful international bankers of the civilized world. By 1250, they were thought to possess some 9,000 landed properties. Both in Paris and London, their houses were used as strongholds in which to preserve the royal treasure. From the English Templars, Henry III borrowed the purchase money for the island of Oleron in 1235. From the French, Philip the Fair extracted the dowry of his daughter Isabella on her marriage to Edward II of England. For Louis IX, they provided the greater part of his ransom, and to Edward I they advanced no less than 25,000 livres tournois, of which they were to remit 4/5. The Templars were most powerful of all in France, where they effectively constituted a state within a state. And as their influence steadily increased, it was not surprising that Philip the Fair should have become seriously concerned. But Philip also had another, less honorable reason for acting against them. He was in desperate need of money. He had already dispossessed and expelled the Jews and the Lombard bankers. Similar treatment of the Templars, which promised to secure him all Templar wealth and property in his kingdom, would solve his financial problems once and for all. The order would, he knew, prove a formidable adversary. Fortunately, however, he had a weapon ready to hand. For many years there had been rumors circulating about the secret rites practiced by the knights at their midnight meetings. All he now needed to do was to institute an official inquiry. It would not be hard to find witnesses who, in return for a small consideration, would be prepared to give the evidence required. That evidence, when given, was more satisfactory than he had dared to hope. The Templars, it now appeared, were Satanists who, at their initiation, denied Christ and trampled on the crucifix. Sodomy was not only permitted but actively encouraged. Such illegitimate children as were nevertheless engendered were disposed of by being roasted alive. On Friday, 13 October 1307, the Grand Master of the Temple, Jacques de Molay, was arrested in Paris with 60 of his leading brethren. This is believed to be the origin of the grim reputation of the date. Friday, 13 October 1307. To force them to confess, they were first tortured by the palace authorities and then handed over to the official inquisitors to be tortured again. Over the next 6 weeks, no less than 138 knights were subjected to examination, of whom, not surprisingly, 123, including de Molay himself, finally confessed to at least some of the charges leveled against them. Philip, meanwhile, wrote to his fellow monarchs, urging them to follow his example. Edward II of England, who probably felt on somewhat shaky ground himself, was initially inclined to cavil with his father in law, but when firm instructions arrived from Pope Clement, who was only too willing to assist the French king in any way he could, he hesitated no longer. The English master of the order was taken into custody on 9 January 1308. All his knights followed him soon afterwards. The Templars had their champions. When de Molay was interrogated by three cardinals, sent expressly to Paris by the Pope, he formally revoked his confession and bared his breast to show unmistakable signs of torture. At Clement's first consistory, no less than 10 members of the Sacred College threatened to resign in protest against his policy. And early in February, the Inquisition was ordered to suspend its activities against the order. But it was impossible to reverse the tide. In August, the Grand Master examined yet again, renewed his former confessions. The public trial of the order opened on 11 April 1310, when it was announced that any of the accused who attempted to retract an earlier confession would be burned at the, at the stake. On 12 May, 54 knights suffered this fate, and in the next 2 weeks, 9 others followed them. The whole contemptible affair dragged on for another 4 years, during which Pope and King continued to confer, a sure sign of the doubts that refused to go away, and to discuss the disposition of the order's enormous wealth. Meanwhile, Jacques de Molay languished in prison until his fate could be decided. Not until 14 March 1314 did the authorities bring him out on to a scaffold before the Cathedral of Notre Dame to repeat his confession for the last time. They had reason to regret their decision. As Grand Master, Jacques de Molay can hardly be said to have distinguished himself over the previous 7 years. He had confessed, retracted, and confessed again. He had shown no heroism, few qualities even of leadership. But now he was an old man in his middle 70s and about to meet his God. He had nothing more to lose, and so, supported by his friend Geoffrey de Sarney, he spoke out loud and clear. As God was his witness, he and his order were totally innocent of all the charges of which they had been accused. At once he and de Sarney were carried away by the royal marshals, while messengers hastened to Philip. The king delayed his decision no longer. That same evening, the two old knights were rowed out to a small island in the Seine where the stake had been prepared. It was later rumored that, just before he died, de Molay had summoned both Pope Clement and King Philip to appear at the judgment seat of God before the year was out, and it did not pass unnoticed that the Pope was dead in little more than a month, and the king killed in a hunting accident towards the end of November. The French writer Maurice Drouin, in his brilliant series of novels Le Roi Maudit, suggests that de Molay also cursed King Philip from the stake, and with some effect. Philip and his 5 immediate predecessors had reigned a total of 177 years, while the next 6 kings of France covered only 66. The two men faced the flames with courage and died nobly. After night had fallen, the friars of the Augustinian monastery on the further shore came to collect their bones, to be revered as those of saints and martyrs.